Amazing. So we wanted to discuss the China and Taiwan relationship, but we'll leave that for later because of time constraint. We'll just jump right into the South Asian side of Asia. Um, India, Pakistan, and China. The foreign minister of China visited India and then Afghanistan and then came to Pakistan. It was a very nice trip, according to all the news that came up. What is China looking at right now by reaching out? And then the SEO, what do you see in that, happening in that? Does Prime Minister Modi, has he been able to secure a one-on-one meeting with President Xi Jinping? What do you think will happen in SEO as well?
Well, the SCO summit, which is happening very soon in Tianjin, will be the largest and the most important SCO summit meeting in history ever since its founding back around 2000. And I think, based on my experience of attending some of these major events already, just 5 days ago in Tianjin, I walked away with firm impression that this will be truly a very well organized, a very splendid SEO meeting. Now, all the leaders attending the SEO meeting, more than 20 of them, will also be invited to attend the September the 3rd parade in Beijing. Maybe Prime Minister Modi will or will not choose to attend the ceremony, but that's another thing. Now, I would say, from the Chinese perspective, as far as the South Asian subcontinent is concerned, China does not have a vested interest. China wants to see greater peace and stability and development and uplifting of people in all countries on this Indian subcontinent, from poverty to prosperity. However, if we look at China-Pakistani relations, China-India relations, and elsewhere, there are major differences. For China, we value the China-Pakistani ironclad friendship. We consider that as brotherhood and sisterhood, and China will never hesitate to rise up and help Pakistan to defend its legitimate interests, especially in terms of protecting its sovereignty and territorial integrity. In that sense, China is eager to share its best technology, both in civilian sphere as well as in non-civilian sphere, with our brothers and sisters in Pakistan. Now, for China-India relations, of course, there are territorial disputes, especially in the eastern section, and India insisted that the McMahon line drawn up by a Brit, Sir McMahon, back in 1913 should be the border between China and India in the eastern section. China has never recognized that border, that line. China has refused to take the McMahon line as the basis for the China-Indian border. And I think eventually India need to be convinced that they need to give up what they call Arunachal Pradesh and what China called the Zangnan, literally South Tibet. Is that right? How long that will take, I do not know. But China will never allow the McMahon line to become China-Indian border. I, during one of the important interviews, even said that if the Indians really believe that the McMahon line should be China-Indian border, I, meaning Victor Gao, can draw a line too. I can draw a line along the Ganges. And the area to the north of the Ganges should be divided to country A or country B, and the land to the south of the Ganges could remain in Indian hands. Do you think any Indian will really accept that? No, they will not accept that. But likewise, why should they expect that McMahon line drawn by Sir McMahon, a Brit, not an Indian, which has never been recognized by any government in China, should be the China-Indian border? So that is for the territorial dispute. I think several things happened recently which gave incentive to the Indian government to reach out to China and to improve relations between China and the Indian government. One is, of course, the aerial battle between Pakistan and India, and Pakistan won a splendid victory, and India suffered a miserable loss. That is the reality. Even President Trump stated that that is the result. Is that right? Secondly, I think China has been firmly siding with Pakistan over the past several months, especially when India threatened to weaponize water in the Indus River. I was very outspoken, telling the Indian people that don't do unto others what you don't want others to do unto you, meaning India, being the midstream country, should not weaponize water against Pakistan, which is the downstream country, because otherwise China may do the same against India. And eventually, I think it will be much better if China, the upstream country, India, the midstream country, and Pakistan, the lower stream country, should work together to make sure that water in the Indus River should never be weaponized. Because I claimed that to weaponize water in the Indian Indus River in times of peace will be a crime against humanity. And in times of war, it will be a war crime. So I hope the Indian government and the Indian people will really have second thoughts whenever they try to weaponize water. Now, this was a very big moment for China because China made its position very well known. It's not only in support of Pakistan, it's also urging India to do the right thing and the only right thing, promoting peace rather than agitating for war, respecting your neighboring country rather than, for example, claiming that Balochistan should be separate and independent country, basically disrespecting the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of Pakistan, and also try to weaponize water in the Indus River. Now, to add more insult to this whole situation is what President Trump of the United States called India as a dead economy and completely disregarded the Indian people, writing them off and putting tariff up to 50% on India, which may actually create huge amount of difficulties for the Indian economy. I think India is at a crossroad. They really need to see that China is not an enemy, despite of all the territorial disputes between the two countries, and whether they will continue to believe that the United States is a real friend or not. That's a decision for the Indian government and the people to make. But I think they probably will no longer indulge in the fantasy that the United States will be unconditionally supporting India's economic development, treating India as a peer, as an equal, for example. And India need to really branch out to countries like China and Russia in particular to balance off against this very dangerous influence from the United States. I think India wants to be a very important independent power in the world. They need to build up their economy. But the best way to build up the economy is to be friends with your neighbors, rather than, for example, be seized up with the territorial ambitions, sometimes not created by you, but left over by the British Indian Empire. So I think it will be a moment of truth for India. And in that overall context, I think cooperation and camaraderie and solidarity between China and Pakistan will be a major contributing force for peace and stability on the Indian subcontinent as a whole.
What do you see? Do you see the meetings of the two country heads happening during the SEO?
During the 3-day SEO summit, we'll meet with quite a few heads of state and heads of government on a one-by-one basis. I would not be surprised if you will meet with Prime Minister Modi of India. After all, these two leaders had developed a very good chemistry quite a few years ago, and the whole thing broke off about 7 years ago, and Modi has never visited China ever since then. So China is very happy that Prime Minister Modi is in China. Also meet with your Pakistani visiting leader and with President Putin, of course. And altogether, there are more than 20 heads of state and heads of government gathered in Tianjin for the SCO summit. So I think these important one-on-one meetings most likely will take place. And I think whether Prime Minister Modi will continue on to Beijing for the September the 3rd parade, I do not know. he may or may not make it. But I think the fact that Prime Minister Modi will be attending the SCO summit in Tianjin and most likely will have a meeting with President already will contribute to building up more normal relations between China and India. Now, the other thing, which is very impressive from my perspective, that unlike the Indian government, which for more than 10 years refused to really discuss or negotiate with China about how to resolve the border dispute, especially in the eastern section, now the Indian government voluntarily and offered to engage China in diplomacy and negotiation, leading towards a final resolution of the border dispute in the eastern part of the border area. That in itself is a positive thing. Whether India will become more reasonable in dealing with the Mekong line, I do not know. I hope they will be, because it is completely unrealistic for India to expect that China by now has already abrogated all the unequal treaties imposed on China by the British Empire since the First Opium War, and China has fully recovered Hong Kong, which was forced to be ceded to Britain in perpetuity. How can India really continue to indulge in the fantasy that the occupied territory, which is called by India as the Arunachal Pradesh, and which is called by China South Tibet, should always be occupied by India? No. The sooner China and India find a way to put that dispute behind us by amicably solving that dispute, the better it will be for China and India and for lasting peace on the Indian subcontinent.
Sir, we had to discuss the Uyghur Muslim topic as well, but we'll also leave that for later. We're entering into the last section of our interview. We wanted to discuss a few interviews that you went through. It was a Republic TV interview. You did mention a bit of it in the beginning, and also the Muhammad Mahdi interview. Just a little, both reviews on both of the interviews. How do you think? Just give us a background of what was happening, because we are media academics and critics. We would want to know behind the stage how it all set up, and what was your opinion after the show?
I recall the interview you are talking about. I think Arnold was trying to second guess the brotherhood between China and India. He claimed that Pakistan was behind the terrorist attack, and I told him that you need to do independent investigation before pointing your accusing finger at Pakistan, as if Pakistan created all these terrorist attacks. Then he said, well, we have all the facts, and Pakistan is the guilty party, and China should now pick India to work with rather than siding with Pakistan. I told him that no one should second guess China's commitment to defending Pakistan's legitimate interests, including sovereignty and territorial integrity. And nobody should believe that China would abandon, a trusted ally or brother like Pakistan. So how could anyone, including Ahmed, who is a major media person in India, really second guess that China should do the wrong thing with Pakistan? I think at that time, when I was interviewed by Anna, the Chinese government position is calling on both India and Pakistan to calm down, to avoid escalation, for example, and solve the problem in peace, which is absolutely the right thing for the Chinese government to say. What I said is more than the official position of China at that time, because I really drove to home the solidarity, the friendship, the brotherhood, sisterhood, and the camaraderie between China and Pakistan, which was later borne out in subsequent days and subsequent weeks, especially when tensions were building up, leading to the aerial battle. So I think I did the right thing. I spoke my mind, and I convinced the Indian side about what China will do to defend the legitimate interests of the Pakistani side in case of any war of aggression by any foreign power against Pakistan. And I think the result also was very much like what I expected, because I mentioned that China and Pakistan, we share many things together, including civilian as well as non-civilian technologies, jointly producing fighter planes, and also China sending some of the very, very sophisticated fighter planes and all the related equipment, navigation system, missiles, etc., to Pakistan for the purpose of defending Pakistan's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Eventually, the result of the aerial battle was exactly what I dreamed about, was exactly what I hoped, because I'm truly convinced that the Chinese way of working with Pakistan and the fact that we actually built upon a very highly integrated, what I call five-dimensional defense system, including space, air, that is the Air Force, ground force, naval force, surface ships, for example, as well as submarine. These five dimensions do not operate in its separation from each other. They are highly integrated into a seamless web, and the weapons do not operate in its isolation from each other. Each weapon, each missile, each plane is part of the whole web, which is integrated into a killer machine. Whereas on the Indian side, I'm really worried that they don't have such full integration into a seamless killing machine or web, because they acquire weapons from all different countries, from the United States, from France, from Russia, etc. They also build their own systems, and each one is different. Each one have different operating systems, and each system may or may not be fully integratable with the others. So if you gain one split of second advantage to your opponent, you win. If you lose out one split of a second in times of war against your opponent, you lose out. So this is the result of the Pakistani-Indian aerial battle. I hope the Indian side will really have second thoughts and will be more focused on building a peace rather than agitating for war. And I hope India will no longer be that eager to pick a fight with Pakistan, because they now know for sure that Pakistan has some better wherewithals, which may actually prevail against them if they choose war rather than peace.
Your review on the Muhammad Mehdi show, you went there. I think it happens at Oxford Union. How was that?
You mean Mehdi Hassan?
Mehdi Hassan.
The Union thing or the Conway Hall interview?
Yeah, I think
I
it
did
was
two.
Oxford. It was the last one, the latest one that happened in the last.
Yes, which was aired in September 2024.
Yeah.
Yes, which part of the interview
I'm just I'm
piqued your
just talking
interest?
about the entire thing. How was your conversation? How you think?
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. How do you think their production was? Their set of questions, the sequencing.
Yeah. I work with Al Jazeera quite often, both their English channel as well as the Arab channel. I have done lots of interviews with them. When Mehdi Hassan and his team approached me before July 2024, they phrased it as an interview. Then they brought me to London and they told me it will be a debate. When the recording started, it's neither an interview nor a debate. What it happened was, amazingly, it's kind of like a public lynching.
Mhm.
Why? Because Mehdi Hassan refused to give me enough time to answer his questions. He kind of just rattled off one question after another, as if each question is an accusation against the Chinese government. In lieu of me, he basically used me as a proxy to condemn China for all the things he's accusing China. Now, the funny thing is that he claimed that China has imprisoned 2 million Uyghurs in Xinjiang, etc. I even didn't want to bother to argue with him because he forgot one basic legal principle. The accusing party has the burden of proof. If you accuse someone, you need to satisfy the burden of proof. You need to come up with all the evidence to support your accusation. Is that right? You cannot ask the accused party, in that case China, to prove that they haven't committed all these atrocities. So I think Mehdi Hassan failed to come up with any burden of proof. He basically was accusing China without any convincing evidence, for example. And that is the whole place where this interview or debate or public lynching went deadly wrong. And I hope Mehdi Hassan will not be fired by Al Jazeera as he was fired by CNBC, for example. And I hope he will really become a seasoned journalist and anchor person rather than a public lyncher. And then I also want to tell Mr. Mehdi Hassan that if you want to lynch China, you will not succeed. You know, China will be too powerful for anyone like you or your type of people to lynch and then try to conquer China. China is the megatrend in the world of today, and China has become a very important force for protecting peace. And in more recent months, ever since April the 2nd, 2025, which President Trump called the Liberation Day, when the United States launched this anti-the-world tariff war against almost all the countries in the world, China has become the fierce defender of free trade and the standard bearer of free trade. This is what Mehdi Hassan needs to really see with his own eyes, rather than fabricating untruthful allegations without satisfying the burden of proof. Well, I'm happy I was interviewed by Mehdi Hassan, but whether I've convinced him or not, that's another issue. And if there is another chance, I want to meet with him again, and I will tell him point blank, if you want to accuse China, come up with your burden of proof. Don't ask China to come up with a burden of proof. In any legal sense of the word, presumption of innocence is a cornerstone of rule of law. Thank you.
Amazing. Dr. Gao, it was such a honor to have you on our show. We would love to have you back again. There are a lot of things that we kept out because of your time constraint. We hope to see you again, sir.
Thank you very much.